Welcome to the Virtual Roadshow series presented by Channelchek and Noble Capital Markets. Of the 6,000 small and micro-cap companies listed on Channelchek, today we're featuring Aurania Resources, TSXV ticker symbol ARU, OTCQB ticker symbol AUIAF. Research coverage of Aurania Resources is provided by Noble Capital Markets. Noble is a FINRA-licensed, SEC-registered broker-dealer. All Noble research is available on Channelchek. Following the formal presentation, Mark Reichman, Noble's Senior Research Analyst covering Aurania Resources, will ask our presenters a selection of the questions received during the broadcast. And now, joining us from Ecuador, here is Keith Barron, CEO, and Richard Spencer, President of Aurania Resources, to make the presentation. Keith and Richard, take it away.
Hi, everyone. As mentioned, talking to you from Marcus, our field office in southeastern Ecuador. And just as an overview to the company, we've taken up this really big land position in southeastern Ecuador in an area that has never been explored before. And both Keith and I have done this before with prior companies. Keith's company discovered the Fruta del Norte gold deposit, which Lundin Gold has just put into production, and that's going spectacularly well. And with a former company working here in the mid-90s in the adjacent belt, we came across a number of porphyry copper deposits, one of which is now in production and the others are approaching production. So in this land position, never been explored before, our geologists have been working for 3.5 years doing a lot of the basic grunt work. And like anything else that's creative, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. But what that work has done is it puts us in a position where we're now starting to drill a very long lineup of targets. And it's when the drilling starts that the discoveries start to come through. And the discovery potential that we've got is for gold and silver and copper principally. And we're looking for gold silver deposits like Keith previously found at Fruta del Norte, which is a long trend of the geological belt that we're in. Silver rich lead and zinc as well. Sedimentary hosted copper, and then copper in porphyries, and more recently we've started to talk about iron oxide copper gold systems. So we've got 5 different kinds of deposits that we can potentially find in this area. And I think the other crucial thing that sets this company apart from many of the other companies out there that you have to that are available for your funds and competing for your funds is management's alignment with the rest of the shareholders. 45% of the shares are in the hands of management and the board, principally Keith himself. And the significant thing is that he put a lot of that capital in when we really didn't know much about this area. It was just a huge tract of land that we believed had potential, but no one actually knew what that potential was. Our recent exploration over the last couple of years has helped us to define what that potential is. So although there's still risk involved, as there is with any exploration, the risk now that we're starting to drill and have been drilling for the last couple of months is so much less than it was when Keith put in the original seed capital. Keith, over to you on this slide. A sort of snapshot of southeastern Ecuador. The big red block is our 200,000 hectare concession block, so about 500,000 acres in one contiguous area. And this southeastern part of Ecuador that is adjacent to the Peruvian border is an area that is really developing with recent discoveries into Ecuador's new gold and copper producing area. I mean, Fruta del Norte is in this area, came into production late last year, but it's developing with the recent discoveries into a very prominent copper belt as well as having gold in it. So the right-hand graphic is a blow-up of the area of Ecuador that's in that white square. And all those different triangles are different deposits that are aligned in this geological belt. Most recently, SolGold, through its discovery of the Porvenir deposit, has highlighted this area. That's a new copper deposit, and Solaris, up just a little bit lower than our red block there, on the Warinsa project, they're drilling a very high-grade copper porphyry, and that is going to be the key component of this area. Warinsa will open this area up because of its high grade. And then in our red area, not only, which is on the same geological trend, not only are we seeing the copper potential in the porphyry deposits, but we've seen these other 4 kinds of deposits in this area. So this is going to be one of the major gold and copper producing areas in South America going forward.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say, you see this great big red blob we've got here. This is 500,000 acres. This is a heck of a big property. And at the end of the day, people say to us, well, what are you going to do with such a big piece of ground? Well, we've been finding minerals on almost every concession block of the 42 that make up this big piece of ground here. So really what you're doing, if you invest in our company, it's almost like investing in 10 different junior companies. So, you know, it spreads the risk. And this is one of the reasons we took up this big piece of ground in the first place. And Richard's very fond of saying, and he may say it again here, but if you were to take our piece of land and just move it to the south and overlay it on the stuff to the south, we'd have a whole flock of copper porphyry and gold occurrences, and probably a couple of mines. And that's exactly what we think we have on our property. So, and the other thing that I want to point out here, you see on the right-hand side a whole bunch of names here. There's 2 of them in particular, Gomorrah and Jackpot. These are prospects that were found by my former company, Aurelian. We had 96,000 hectares of ground, which included Fruta del Norte, and also included a very high priority target of Lundin Gold's called Barbasco. Now, the company, when it was sold, everything went all at once. And I am not going to have a situation here where all of Aurania's 208,000 hectares is going to go to one company, because we've got 5 different types of mineralization here. We've got something for everyone in the industry, all the seniors here. And it is our intention to have multiple joint ventures so that the shareholders get multiple bites of the apple here. Okay, I'm done, Richard.
Thanks, Keith. The board is a very good board, very independent thinkers, and a lot of experience in the industry and in the financial markets. In terms of the management team, we've got a very small footprint in Toronto in Canada. But what I wanted to highlight here is that in our 100% owned Ecuadorian subsidiary, those are all Ecuadorians. The entire team is Ecuadorian, apart from John Paul Pallier, our VP of exploration. But these Ecuadorian guys are absolutely invested and doing a wonderful job here. In terms of what we're doing right now, we started drilling some of the copper silver deposit or targets. We started that drill campaign in mid-September, and you know, all these different names in the second column there are just the different individual targets. And on the right-hand side there, the planned drilling is not a huge amount of drilling per target, and that is, it goes back to what Keith was saying, that we're here to make multiple discoveries. And I'll come back to that in a second. After drilling in the Senken area, we plan to move over onto the Chiria-Shimpia area, which has got great silver potential. It looks like the Cerro de Pasco area in northern Peru. And then after drilling that, we plan to move over onto some copper gold targets that we believe are a cluster of porphyries. That totals about 11,000 meters of drilling, and that is now funded thanks to the financing that we did in November. And just going back to the small amount of drilling that we're doing on each target, the concept is that we have this little man-portable rig, so we helicopter it into the core of the jungle where the target is, and then once it's there, we move it around by hand. It drills really good quality core. It will drill down to about 800 meters maximum, and that's all we need for testing these targets. The concept is that that small amount of drilling that we do on each target is really just to give us a prime opportunity to make a discovery. As soon as we make a discovery and we get an intercept that we feel is significant, this little rig would then move on to the next target, and we would bring in a second and a third drill rig to start getting to give us a sense of the size and grade of the discovery that we've made. But this whole approach is set up to ensure that we don't get sidetracked with the first significant mineralization that we come across, be it gold or copper or silver. We want to make sure that this little rig is always out there, because there's no way that we can know whether the first intercepts that we get that are significant are going to be the best target in the district. We have to keep this little rig out there ahead. We refer to this as scout drilling, and that's literally what it is. So the whole company's strategy is set up to make multiple discoveries. We are not producers. We are not mine builders. That's a different set of DNA. And the reason that we focus on the discovery area of valuation of companies is that, one, that's where our skill set is. That's what we've done before. But the impact that a discovery has on the valuation of the company is absolutely dramatic. It's illustrated on the left-hand side in this classic Lasson diagram that he probably drew on a napkin after a glass of wine one night. But it's absolutely right. On the top right is SolGold's share price. They made a wonderful discovery in northern Ecuador a couple of years ago, and then they decided that they were going to become producers, and we can see what happened to the share price subsequent to that. And the bottom one on the right is Keith's prior company, Aurelian Resources, with the discovery of Fruta del Norte. And again, that huge impact that a discovery has on valuation of a company. And in Aurania, we are absolutely set up to try and capture that green area, that increase in value, but capture it a couple of times through making multiple discoveries. Just focusing now in on the area that we've started drilling in, the colored image are the wild colors that come through from magnetics. So we flew this area measuring the amount of magnetism that the Earth inherently has. This is a big area. It's about 12 kilometers long of our 95 kilometer long concession area. And the purple and red colors are the highly magnetic areas. And the reason we flew this heliborne survey is that with copper-bearing porphyries, or porphyries that tend to have a lot of copper with them, they have a magnetic core to them. And that magnetism is something that we can pick up in these kind of surveys. So the Senken N2, N3, N4 area, and there are a couple of more north of that, they are the size magnetic feature that we would expect from a porphyry. And so we decided to start drilling those areas in our scout drilling. That big area that we've called the Senken magnetic center down towards the bottom of that diagram it's huge. It's 5 kilometers in diameter. Bear in mind that the drill that we're using, the core that we actually get out of the ground, is about 5 centimeters or 2 inches in diameter. So, you know, one has to be pretty sure as to what the target looks like before one starts plugging little 5 centimeter holes into it, 5 centimeter diameter. So we decided to look at the individual targets in Senken N2, N3, and 4 before we came back to the main magnetic center at Senken. And this is what we've got. Instead of finding porphyries, we found excuse me, mineral alteration that was very indicative of iron oxide copper gold systems. And we are now realizing through the drilling that N2, N3, N4, and probably N5 were originally one big magnetic blob, one big magnetic feature and body that's now been cut up by faults. And that's what those blue and green bands are that are going through there. The critical thing out of the drilling that we've done, and those numbers that are on the graphic show the boreholes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and where we're drilling hole 6 at the moment. The minerals that we were seeing in the core that was coming out of those drill holes was giving us a vector towards the northeast. And so we're progressively moving towards the northeast in the drilling to where we believe the heart of the system will actually be. And we now, through the drilling, are realizing that we're dealing not only with one iron oxide copper gold system, but actually two. There's one in that northern area, and then that big blob in the south is the second iron oxide copper gold target. And you know, this is what the core looks like. It's flooded with an iron mineral, so the iron oxide in the name indicates this red mineral and another magnetic mineral. On the left-hand side, those are photographs of core from the Ernest Henry iron oxide gold deposit that's in production in Australia. And on the right-hand side, that is the core, and each cylinder is about 5 centimeters, 2 inches in diameter. That's the core that we're drilling at Senken. Pretty much identical to what's coming out of these iron oxide copper gold deposits that are actually in production at the moment. And that's why we're seriously excited about what we're seeing at Senken. And then, you know, the question is, okay, you've got the iron minerals, what about the copper and the gold? Well, the gold, obviously, we can't see. We have to wait for the analyses to come back, and we expect that they'll be back imminently. But we are starting to see copper. So not huge amounts of copper, but we know that the amount of copper that we're seeing is increasing towards that northeastern area along the direction of the vector. And so once we've honed in on where where we believe that the core, the heart of the Senken system is, the next thing that's in priority ranking for our scout drilling, and remember we've always said, as soon as we make a significant discovery, we will move that little scout drilling rig off onto the next target, because that might be a better deposit than the first one. We would then bring a second and third rig onto Senken, while that little rig out in front moves onto the Chiria-Shimpia area, which again is a massive area. It's 15 kilometers long, or 7-8 miles long, and it's a silver-dominated system. It looks like the Cerro de Pasco system in Peru that's been mined, well, originally by the Spanish starting in about 1620 or so, and it's still being mined today. And in fact, as the Cerro de Pasco system has, that's about 10, 12 kilometers long. So very much the same sort of footprint that we're seeing in our exploration. And from a silver play potential, and we know that there are lots of silver bugs out there, this is a great target to have in our portfolio. And all these bodies that are shown here, the gray and sort of perfect bodies, are soil results just showing where we expect those individual veins to come to the surface. And the takeaway from this is that it's a big system, and we're seeing a system of at least 3, 4, potentially 5 veins there over a couple of miles long each. The other thing that we've done is, that this 500,000 acres that we've been talking about is in the blue area. All of the drilling and all of the targets that we've been talking about are on the Ecuadorian side of the border. And what drew our attention to the step that we took into northern Peru is that the sedimentary copper that we were starting to find in our blue area, never been explored before, really looked like the Zambian copper belt, which extends into the area that Ivanhoe has got in the Congo, and also the Kupferschiefer that runs between Germany and Poland. The world's biggest silver producer is actually from this kind of sedimentary hosted copper and silver. Where you get those systems, they tend to extend over hundreds of miles. And so the prime examples are the Kupferschiefer and the Central African Copper Belt. So we were looking on the Ecuadorian side of the border in that blue belt and thinking, okay, if we're right about this, we've got to extend, we've got to believe that the extension of these rocks with the copper and silver potential is going to extend over hundreds of miles. We looked across the border into Peru, and there were companies there reporting the same kind of high-grade copper and silver that we were getting in Ecuador, and we thought, okay, right, we're onto one of these basins that truly does extend over hundreds of kilometers. So all those little golden-colored areas are specific concession areas amounting to about 1 million acres, where that particular sedimentary layer that has the best potential for the copper and silver, where that comes to surface. So those little squiggles are concession areas that are very, very specifically taken up to give us, to cover the area where those sedimentary bands with copper and silver potential come to surface. So we've swung the bats at this. We thought it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and we acted accordingly. We're delighted that in the last couple of days, Hannon Resources, which is one of our competitors in this area, has just signed a joint venture agreement with JOGMEC, a Japanese state entity that is a phenomenal explorer, one of the top class exploration companies out there. And we're delighted to see that this area is, and the sedimentary copper concept is starting to attract the attention of the major companies. And in fact, Barrick Gold, after saying that it was very interested in copper, has ring-fenced, taken up 65,000 hectares of land all around one of our concession areas. So we're now seeing 2 majors step into this northern part of Peru, which bodes well for us going forward. In terms of capital structure, about 51 million shares fully diluted. But again, the pie diagram on the right-hand side, that means that the management of the company and the board is absolutely focused on what makes the other shareholders happy. The only way that any of us can make money out of this company is through a valuation leap through discovery, and that's why we're absolutely focused to our last bone on making these discoveries. And obviously I've talked about exploration up till now. That goes absolutely hand in glove with a huge social outreach. We're working in an area and living here in a very poor part of Ecuador that's been neglected by government since the Spanish were here. And we're delighted to say that we're working very well with the local communities, and we're learning an incredible amount from them. And hopefully those communities are learning a little bit from us in terms of sanitation and water purification and just those very sort of basic human rights. Absolutely.
They gave me a bottle. Yesterday, Richard, they gave me a bottle of COVID medicine. They say it's a sure cure. I'm afraid to. I haven't had the COVID. I'm afraid to try it out.
Well,
But
Keith,
yeah, no, we've made a lot of friends in the community.
yeah, and you know, the COVID situation in Ecuador has been pretty difficult, but in this particular area, it seems to be pretty much under control, and you know, the local people are using their traditional medicines. And think what you like, it seems to be functional. You know, I think being here in southeastern Ecuador is probably the safest place on the planet just at the moment in terms of COVID. So, you know, just to summarize very briefly, you know, I think if there's one picture to take away from this company in this presentation today, it's that shareholder composition. Keith, as our CEO, doesn't take a salary. The only way that he can make any money out of his investment in the company is through a discovery, the same way that any of the rest of us as shareholders can make. That's why we've focused on discovery and multiple discoveries. Our program, our drill program, is moving along really well. We're starting to see results that are pretty exciting. We've extended into Peru on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you know, JOGMEC, the Japanese company, the major, coming in to help with the exploration in that area, albeit with one of our competitor companies. That doesn't matter. The key thing is that the major companies are starting to recognize the same thing that we recognized when we staked that land in Peru, that, hey guys, for our shareholders, this is an incredible opportunity, and therefore we have to act on it. And that's exactly what we did. So just in terms of you know, a little bit of housekeeping, Carolyn Muir, email at the bottom left there. She is the most reliable of all of us. She is always available, and Keith and I, she knows where to get us out of the undergrowth, and she always will if you need anything clarified that isn't clear on one of our videos or press releases or whatever. And so thank you very much, and I'd be delighted to try and answer between Keith and I some of your questions. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. I'm Mark Reichman, the Noble Senior Analyst who covers Aurania Resources, and I will be reading the questions submitted for Keith and Richard's response. So the first question is, with so many excellent targets that could all yield the big score, isn't it hard to figure out what to concentrate on? And for the critic stating that Aurania has too much land and is moving too slow, what would your best answer to those critics be?
Maybe I'll handle the second one first, and you handle the first one. Well, folks that say we're going a little bit too slow, we are going at this very, very methodically, and using exactly the same methodology that Richard used to find the porphyry coppers in the belt to the south of us, and that Aurelian used to find Fruta del Norte and a bunch of other porphyry coppers, which are now in the Newcrest Lundin Gold joint venture. So, you know, it does take time. The only company that ever had very, very quick success and drill results that were continuously getting better was Briex, and of course that was a fraud. So you got to cut us some slack, because it takes time to do this stuff, and it takes money, and it involves a lot of professional people with great experience, and very, very fortunate for us, we have all those elements. So we're doing this thing, and gosh, I'd like to come up with a big score here as fast as possible, but we have a situation here where it could happen on almost any of our concessions, because we're finding gold, we're finding copper, we're finding lead, zinc, silver all over the place, and we've got all these different possibilities. There's many, many other juniors out there that have one little postage stamp that has been hammered away at many, many times before. It's a retread, and it's kind of a Hail Mary situation. They're drilling and hopefully trying to find something that's going to be good. The chances of finding something world-class in that scenario are basically nil. But if you go into a frontier area like we are, we're elephant hunting. And that is our intention, not just to find one elephant, but we're going to find a whole damn herd of them here. But anyway, I'll let you answer the rest of that, Richard.
Mark, you know, a really good question, and you know, this is the thing that keeps me up at night. Certainly, is, you know, are we prioritizing the right areas? And you know, this is where a little bit of experience counts. We do have a multitude of targets. However, let's just take Senken as an example. You know, originally we had 5 targets in the Senken North area. And from this little bit of scout drilling that we've done, we haven't even done 1,500 meters yet. We've realized that, hey, those 5 targets are actually one that are just cut by these faults. And we're moving in the right direction. We're moving along the lines of the vectors. The big Senken target that we felt was just too big for us to be able to handle, now that we know what we're dealing with in that area, and these iron oxide copper gold systems are normally in clusters, they're normally in districts, we realized that, hey, the geophysical signature plus the soil, the enrichment of various elements in the soils over that big Senken target area that was confusing us originally now makes perfect sense. You know, as an iron oxide copper gold target, you know, the holy grail of an iron oxide copper gold deposit, I think, is the biggest mine on Earth at Olympic Dam in South Australia. It's been in production for 40 years, and I believe they've got about 60 years of reserves left. That is, if you take the footprint of that massive deposit and you put it over our Senken central area, then the complicated soil patterns start to make sense. So, you know, this is not a linear progression of going from one sort of blindly from one target to the next to the next. It's with each meter or foot of drilling that we do, we are learning and we're realizing, hey, this makes sense with the next target down the road, and that helps us to reprioritize. And you know, there are samples coming in from the field teams at the moment that have us pretty damn excited now that we have an understanding that we really are looking for iron oxide copper gold systems in these areas. So it's not a linear progression. It might look like it might look slow, but in fact, you know, it's starting to accelerate, and you just have to take my word for that for the time being, but it's evident over the next couple of months. And you know, we're going to have some failures along the line, but that's what exploration is all about. You can't have a success without a couple of failures. That's life, and we're prepared to, you know, we've done this before. We'll deal with that as we come. But very good question, and you know, we are already starting to accelerate, and what we're seeing in our drilling is helping us with the other targets. The other thing that I should just mention is that we are within spitting distance of starting a mobile MT geophysical survey. That is likely to help us. Now that we've done the scout drilling, we know the kind of system that we're dealing with, we can really focus that geophysics, and I think that that's going to give us a big leg up and help us to prioritize the targets as well.
And Richard and Keith, we have several questions asking about efforts to locate the lost cities. So perhaps an update would be helpful.
The law in Ecuador is that if you find something that's culturally significant, you have to report it, and it then gets dealt with by the government at the government's pace. So if one were to find something that was potentially historically significant, one needs to manage that information pretty carefully. So don't take our silence on the search for the lost cities as being an indication that we're not doing anything. We are, through the LiDAR, finding evidence of quite a significant infrastructure in this area. And when I talk about infrastructure, we've talked a little bit about the roads, which are great big engineered things. I was walking along one a couple of weeks ago that we had spotted in the LiDAR, and when you're on the ground, there is absolutely no doubt that that is an engineered structure. We had always wondered how the Spanish were able to find these mines so quickly, and it's now becoming clear that there was an existing infrastructure in this area built by, one of the other groups of people that the Spanish probably hybridized on. So, having said that, I'm not trying to give the impression that we've found the lost cities. We haven't. But certainly in terms of infrastructure, that seems to be converging on areas where we think those cities probably were, and I use that word cities loosely. We're actually making really, really good progress. The silver area that we are planning to drill next has got all sorts of peculiar landforms in it that we think were probably Spanish workings, nothing definitive yet. But when we do find something significant, we will announce it. But we're treading warily. We're taking our obligation to the government very seriously. We're taking our obligation to the Ecuadorian people very seriously. And just to finish, I don't think any of us have an expectation that we would have found a huge city. What we're finding is that there was a big center that's actually off our concession area that's been found already by other people's LiDAR, that was the sort of cultural hub. And like happens today, the sort of cultural hub and actual city was located in a fertile valley where there's good water and all that kind of thing. And the mining operations were actually little satellite operations that were somewhere else. There wasn't much infrastructure apart from roads there. So, we're getting actually a pretty clear picture on the whole sort of infrastructure around the lost cities, and it's really exciting. We just haven't found anything that's quite sort of specific enough to be able to convince all the shareholders out there that we're onto it, but we're certainly making phenomenal progress. Over to you, Keith.
Well, the next question is, where are we on the induced polarization on Crunchy Hill and Yowie, and when are we returning to the drilling of those excellent epithermal gold targets?
Mark, a good question again. The issue with those ground geophysical techniques is that we're dealing with intense jungle cover, high slopes that are covered with clay. So in walking up a hill, you spend most of your time going backwards, and when you're walking down, you go head over heels forward. The concept of lugging a generator around through the field is it's not trivial, and from a safety perspective, it brings us into a whole different dimension. So what we've decided to do in the short term is we're going to do some test lines with the mobile MT, which is a heliborne system, over not Crunchy but over Yowie. And the logic for or the thinking behind that is that the mobile MT does two things. It measures a conductivity. So if there are sulfides around related with a porphyry or with an epithermal, and Fruta del Norte actually has a lot of sulfides in it, we should pick that up by those sulfides, those metal sulfides conducting the electricity. So we should pick that up. And then most epithermal systems also are in quartz veins, or they have sort of quartz mantos, or sort of flat-lying quartz associated with them. And the mobile MT should pick up those as resistors, because the quartz or the silica is an absolute resistor when it comes to transmitting electricity. So We're going to do a trial of the Yowie epithermal target with mobile MT, because we've in fact got two targets there. We've got a deep-seated porphyry, and we can see fragments of that porphyry. So we're going to look for the porphyry, which should be a little bit deeper, and we're also going to look for the silica in the epithermal. If the mobile MT works there, and typically we would have those results from that trial back within a couple of days, maybe a week at the outside of flying that trial. If it works, then we would fly Crunchy and Yowie. If it doesn't work appropriately, or it will likely work to some extent, and that will help us to home in on where we need to do the ground geophysics. Doing the ground geophysics is not trivial, so the more that we can pinpoint the area that we need to do the ground geophysics on, the better in terms of cost and safety and all the rest of it. So Yowie and Crunchy Hill are very much in our plans, and we should start the mobile MT very shortly, and the plan to test that area is it's going to be one of the first things that we do.
If I might just add, Richard, we did plan and we did say publicly we were going to do a CSAMT survey over Crunchy Hill and Yowie. I think that people are aware from some of the maps that we published that the national road passes through that area. It's an area where there's a lot of COVID in the villages, and we decided to just stay the hell away from it for the time being. Because if we started to work in that area, then and there was COVID in the area, we might get blamed for it. Better idea by far is to work on Senken, because Senken is a fly-in operation with a helicopter. We control the access 100% there, and so that's what we're doing. Now, it still is the law in Ecuador, in our part of Ecuador, that you can only have 50% personnel on site at any one time. And that's because of the COVID. That's the reality that we have to live with, folks, for the time being. So the CSAMT crew would have had to come from Mexico, and the national airports were closed all the way from March until 6 weeks ago. So we were living in a new reality like everyone else on the planet here, and but very, very fortunately, we've come up with an IOCG, which was almost completely unexpected. So it's it's funny how life works.
But the heliborne system, does give us a chance of taking a really good look at both Crunchy and Yowie. It's a system that should see down to at least 1 kilometer, so half a mile or so in depth. So it would take literally a couple of days to fly it with a helicopter. So we're hoping that that'll work. That we will see the targets in more detail there, and then as Keith says, when we can get the foreign crews in, that CSAMT survey would be done over a sort of pinpoint locality.
The next question is, you have mentioned that Barrick ring-staked 2 of your packages in Peru. What do you make of that?
Great stuff.
Well, Mark, the thing is, the reality of it is when we applied for over 400,000 hectares there, or over 1 million acres, we thought that we were nuts. Secondly, but we didn't think it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. When we applied for all that land, we wondered where the opposition was. There wasn't much opposition. We probably got 90% of the land that we felt was priority 1. So there's very little competition. We wondered, where are the majors? What are we seeing or what are the majors seeing that we aren't seeing? So we've had probably a year of sort of sleepless nights thinking that we were just completely off our rockers, and And then, when Barrick Green staked us, we thought, okay, we don't know what their logic is. They might have a completely different target style, but at least it is the prime major. I mean, Mark Bristow at Barrick is an exploration geologist. He understands. He will get a concept, an exploration concept in a nanosecond. So they're an exciting company to be in the belt, and then JOGMEC coming into a different part of the belt with one of our competitors the other day, earlier this week. That announcement came through. Just and I cannot reiterate how good an exploration company they are. Got huge horsepower in terms of not only technical know-how but money as well from the Japanese government. Two of the top class exploration companies in the world starting to concentrate on the sedimentary copper. It's really exciting. It just puts us in a really good spot. So what we're doing in Peru, we're not making a lot of noise about it, but there is a lot of data there from the oil industry. We are working in putting all of that data into 3 dimensions, 3-dimensional models, so that we can work out which parts of those different basins are most likely to have copper in them. And that's going to help us to focus our exploration, so that when we do decide to trigger the ground exploration in Peru, it's going to be much more focused than it looks at the moment, with 1 million acres under control. So again, that's a little bit like the historic side of things in the search for the lost cities. Lots going on in the background, and not much being said in the public domain, just because there isn't much specific to say just yet, but a huge amount of work going on it.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. Keith and Richard, thank you for helping us get a better understanding of the company's story. If you would like to access our independent research on Aurania Resources Limited, please go to channelchek.com and type the company name or the ticker AUIAF in the search box located in the top left company data section of the site. Again, thanks to our guests, Dr. Keith Barron and Dr. Richard Spencer from Aurania Resources Limited.
This has been the Virtual Roadshow series brought to you by Channelchek and Noble Capital Markets. Log into Channelchek or subscribe to our YouTube channel to get the full catalog of roadshows and C-suite interview channelcasts. Register for Channelchek's no-cost premium content and receive notifications of new releases from both series. Thank you for joining us.